Good morning, friends. Good morning, beloveds. What a joy. What an absolute joy it is for me to be here with you this morning. And I know from talking to some of you, it's a joy for many, many of you too. In 2018, this congregation voted to sell your old building and seek and build a new home. The time between that moment and today has been far more complicated than you might have imagined. So much has happened. A pandemic, the departure of a much-loved minister, rental spaces, online and unanticipated delays in the completion of this space, and then more ministerial transitions. After a long and frustrating time, we have arrived here today. The 7 years since that vote and the 3 years since those tours we heard about haven't been exactly 40 years of wandering the desert like Moses and the Israelites. But you have been on the move and you have been unsure of when you might arrive. And so again, I invite us all just to pause. It is good to be together. It's mostly coincidence, but I don't think the timing of today's sermon topic, what are we doing here, could be better timed for today. Here we are setting out on the next chapter of the life of the congregation, and it seems like an excellent time to ask the questions. Why are you here, and what are we doing here? Now, I don't mean why are you here in this particular room on this particular Sunday, though maybe the answer to that question is I wanted to see what the space looked like, or the coffee's probably better than at home, or my kid woke me up too early anyways, or something else. But I mean bigger question. Why do we bother with church at all? Why do we still in 2025 gather as a congregation? What are we doing here? Because let's be honest, you can find inspiring TED Talks online. You can meditate in your own space. You can donate to good causes with the tap of your phone. So if it's just about information, inspiration, or action, none of us actually need a congregation. And yet here we are. I heard a story once about someone who had taken a long break from church. Maybe you've taken breaks, I have. Anyways, after this long break from church, she came back one Sunday morning. She'd been through a rough season, work stress, a breakup, feeling burned out. When asked what prompted the return, she responded, "I didn't come because I suddenly believed something new. I came because I needed to be reminded that life was bigger than my problems." She said she walked in, sat down, and before the service even started, when someone turned and said hello and smiled at her, it was enough to bring tears to her eyes. That's the thing. A congregation isn't just a place we come to think, it's a place we come to be held. Sometimes by words, sometimes by music. Thank you, musicians. Sometimes by silence, and sometimes by each other. We live in a culture that tells us we're supposed to be self-sufficient. We're supposed to figure out our lives on our own, pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, and carry on never asking for help. But here's the truth. Human beings were never meant to go it alone. We are wired for connection. And congregation is one of the few places left where people of different ages, backgrounds, and beliefs can promise to stick together with each other. Not because we agree on everything, because we don't, but because we've chosen to be companions with one another. James Luther Adams, a Unitarian scholar of the last century, said church is where we practice being human. Not always graceful, this business of practicing. And there's a story about the First Unitarian Church of Chicago where Adams was a member and a board member. He taught across the street at the Meadville Lombard Theological School. So the congregation was at the urging of their minister at the time, this is, I think, the 50s, the urging of their minister and Adams, considering a bylaw change that would officially desegregate the membership. That neighborhood of Chicago was quite diverse, but the congregational bylaw stated that it was a congregation where only white people could be admitted into membership. So they're considering a bylaw change. Desegregation was a hot topic during those years. Most board members agreed with the proposal, but one objected, saying, well, it's going to be a new kind of orthodoxy, or we'll be excluding the people who don't feel comfortable. And the story goes on that at one board meeting, which had gone on far too long, past midnight, early morning, Adams, who was on the board, turned to the person who was objecting and said, well, what do you think the purpose of this church is anyway? Everyone in the room took a breath and waited. The person in opposition paused and responded, to change people like me. The bylaw was passed. And one telling of the story I heard was that that person then left the congregation and made way for the change, though. Congregations can be a practice ground for being human. We practice patience when the sermon runs a little long. I promise I'll try not to. We practice forgiveness when someone forgets our name. We practice generosity when we pass the plate or tap the phone. We practice hope when we sing songs that we don't always feel in the moment. It's not about being perfect. It's about practicing, so that when we step back into the wider world, we've exercised our muscles of compassion, resilience, and courage. But here's the other piece. Congregations aren't just about what happens within these walls, about how we are with one another. It is about what we carry with us when we leave. But you know that. That's not a surprise to you, because that knowledge was fundamental to the decision to leave your old location, to wander around without a secure place to call your own until today. I know that the past few years have been challenging, frustrating, and at times overwhelming, even as they were at the same time full of promise and hope. I'm not usually everything happens for a reason kind of person, but I am often what meaning can we make of this kind of person. I mentioned Moses earlier, and while that story is, in contrast to this one, very epic, I do see some resonance. A quick summary of the Moses story, or at least the part that's relevant here today, there's a lot of chapters to that story, involves this character, Moses, who becomes the leader of a group of Israelites who are enslaved in Egypt. Moses, receiving instructions from God, leads an escape of his people from Egypt towards an unknown promised land. The journey is not straightforward. People follow, but soon grow tired of the uncertainty of 40 years in the desert. GPS might have been helpful, but you know. In the final phase of the journey, just as the end is in sight, Moses is now ancient. He goes up a mountain. He dies and doesn't get to make the trip. And in fact, most of the early generation that escaped with him don't get to see Promised Land. It's the next generation that can fully arrive at the destination. Modern scholars see the 40 years in the desert as about transformation, not about geography. The people had been enslaved for generations. You can't just walk out of Egypt and immediately be free in heart and mind, ready for what comes next. The desert years symbolize the long, often frustrating process of becoming a new community. The old ways need to be forgotten before you're ready for a new understanding of yourself as a people. Even Moses doesn't get to go. There's a truth about that for leadership, because no one person completes the journey. So the story's about growth. It's about new ways requiring inner change, not just a new address. It's about how communities, like individuals, sometimes must wander, stumble, and to learn through struggle before they're ready for something new. And as I think about the wisdom in that story, it has me thinking about our story. When I asked Google, the Oracle, for a profile of the neighborhood of 175 St. Clair, your old address, it told me the neighborhood is a blend of upscale residential areas like Forest Hill and South Hill, characterized by luxurious high-end condominiums. When I asked the same question about this neighborhood, it said, well, the answer included, Oakwood Vaughan is a vibrant, multicultural Toronto neighborhood. It's a residential area with active regeneration efforts, attracting diverse residents and families. Those are not the same things. So I know you have a commitment to being good neighbors, to become integrated into this community. The Building Connections with Oakwood Vaughan Group has begun making connections that will serve you well. They have introduced themselves in the neighborhood so that we can become part of this neighborhood. A neighborhood that's more representative of Toronto than the one you left. I wonder how ready this congregation would have been to build those mutually exclusive kinds of relationships we're imagining if you'd been able to walk out of the old building straight into this one. I wonder if you needed time to shake off the Forest Hill identity, to spend time with one another in a wandering, buildingless state, learning new ways of being in community before the potential of today was possible. Maybe you could have done it, but the truth is you are a different congregation today than you were then. Some people are no longer here, or some of you are here in different ways. There are new people, those who joined you without the associations that the old address had. You are a new community. We are here today. We have arrived, and it is a good day. But back to the question, what are we doing here, and what are we doing here? We come, I think, in large part to understand ourselves, to practice this business of being human. As I think about my time as a UU, 40 plus years now, it's hard to think back, wondering how my life might have turned out had I not found that congregation. I honestly believe I've been encouraged and sometimes prodded into being a better version of myself. I think my consumer habits, my hobbies, my parenting choices, the way I've been in partnership with my spouse, Gary, have all been influenced by being part of a UU congregation. I'm pretty sure me, a white, well-educated, straight woman, the child of a loving home, would not likely have become an activist, speaking out for the rights of LGBTQ members of our communities, if I hadn't have had good people challenging my assumptions about the way the world worked. I think a non-UU version of Linda would have been very surprised to see me advocating for equal marriage at a federal legislative committee. Don't think that would have happened. What are we doing here? We are asking people to grow in compassion and in support of justice and equity. How that plays out in our lives might look different from one person to another, but we are asking that we push past some of our assumptions, some of our comfortable places, and consider new perspectives. I have practiced being human, and I know, because I know some of your stories and the history of the congregation, that you have too. And there have been a few occasions in my life when my family has faced loss. The death of a niece at age 30, the loss of jobs, others too. And in those days, like the woman in the story I shared earlier, I have been reminded that I have been held in love, that others care, that others see me. And I know that happens here. You care about one another. You do your best to be fit companions. I am so appreciative. It is a gift. So challenging, caring, so that the members of the congregation are encouraged and sustained during the years of their journey is indeed part of the answer. What are we doing here? But again, what are we doing here? I suspect part of the motivation for this move was to advance a more diverse congregational profile. I've heard the thinking, if we move to a more diverse neighborhood, more people, those with different identities than the typical one, will know who we are, and then we'll find ourselves a more diverse congregation. That may happen, it may not, but if that's the way we think, we are still centering ourselves in the work, in the consideration. If that were the only motivation, it would mean that our choice was driven by our needs and wants. Of course, that's going to be part of the thinking. I'm not naive, but I think we can, and I think you are doing better. Oakwood Vaughan is already diverse, it is vibrant, and it is full of people who are doing good work. Your connections with the Oakwood Vaughan Community Organization reflect the collective desire to support that good work, not out of a sense of, oh, let us help you be more like us, but rather to do your part in the work, so that we may, in a dance of interdependence, create a vibrant, mutually beneficial community. What are we doing? What are we doing here today? Maybe today we get to rest, if only for a moment, to celebrate, to appreciate one another. In the years since this congregation voted to move, bought this property, managed the realities of congregational life during the pandemic, found rental space, met online, faced the disappointment of construction delays, you have done good work. This is not the congregation it was. There are new faces, some are missing, but most importantly, you have grown into the community that gathers now, here today, online, and in this room. Let us celebrate, and let's remember what it is we're doing. There's a new mission statement. It kind of says it all. We are an open-minded and welcoming spiritual community guided by shared values. Our mission is to nurture connection, share life's joys and sorrows, and act for love and justice. We don't share the same beliefs or backgrounds, but we are curious, and we do share some values of connection, of companionship, and of love and justice. Each one of us has a role to play in making that dream reality. We begin in doing that work here today, in this neighborhood, with one another, and for those outside of the building. There's an old tale about a traveler who came to a village and asked 3 people what they were doing. The first said, I'm laying bricks. The second said, I'm building a wall. And the third said, I'm building a cathedral. That's what this congregation is. On the surface, we're just laying bricks, singing hymns, brewing coffee, holding meetings, teaching kids classes. But together, we are building something far greater than the sum of the living parts, like the geese in the reading. Breathing and creating community of love. So the purpose of the congregation, it's simple and it is profound. To remind us that we belong to each other, to shape us into people of compassion, and to send us out into the world carrying a light that does not go out. That's what we're doing here. Let's have some coffee and talk to one another. Keep our minds and our hearts open, so that each of us in our own way can get on with it.